Alright, so it's been a few days since I set the wall behind myself, and I think it's time that I hopped on it to show you some of the problems. So hopefully this video is going to be a little bit of projecting, maybe some forerunning if some things feel a little too easy and I have to tweak them, because remember, the reason I have this wall is to get stronger and to challenge myself, so if I need to tweak some things, I'm definitely going to. And I'm going to try to get a lot of angles to show you what I set, how I approach the boulders, how hard or maybe how easy some of the things are based on the angle of the holds, the size, the shape. It's really hard to tell straight on, so I'll try to get some of those angles, and hopefully I can have some success and actually send some stuff, because I'm not sure if I'm weaker or stronger than I was when I first started setting on this wall, because it literally has been months. And I've climbed outside, I've done some hangboarding, and I've done some weighted pull-ups, but I'm not sure if I'm weaker or if I'm stronger. So wish me luck, and let's get to the climbing. So first things first, I gotta warm up before I try climbing anything too hard. I know some people don't really warm up, but I think that's a risky way to enjoy a lifelong sport, or at least it is for me. So here we go, warm up time. One great thing about having a densely packed area of climbing holds is that you can pretty easily just run a circuit through whatever holds you're comfortable warming up on, and gradually incorporate moves and holds as you see fit. Here you can see two angles of the wall and get a sense of what I'm actually pulling on. Where it makes sense and where I had the time, I tried to get different angles of some of the problems. I will also show some B-roll where it makes sense to get a better idea of the holds that I'm actually using. I think this will make up for the time-lapse setting from the last video, and if you haven't seen that, now is your cue to go over and watch that, as it is kind of like a prerequisite for this video, and it's going to be linked somewhere below. So after doing a couple of laps, I carried on into some of the color-based problems that I set. Some of these were things that I set for Laura. While they aren't exactly V0 warm-up problems, difficulty is relative to your climbing level, and they were in a range where I wouldn't hurt myself pulling on them while still fresh. With that said, some of these weren't set for anyone in particular. They were just easier climbs to pull on for fun, like this yellow one. These are nice to have just to warm up on, and for people who aren't as proficient at climbing, if we're ever able to have people over again. As I show each problem, it might be an interesting exercise to try to guess if you think they're hard or not before I actually hop on them. And then I will try to provide some evidence one way or another as to if your assumptions were right. Or you can just sit back and watch whatever floats your boat. Alright, this problem on these black holds is a combination of holds that have varied edges, and some in cut more than others. A few years back, I might have considered them all to be pretty challenging, but now I find them more comfy. So the more positive holds have been turned into side pulls. The one hold that is different than the others is the sloper on the volume. It is very low profile, and if it wasn't mounted on this volume, it would be useless on this wall. The idea here is to use it and the edge of the volume as a large sloping pinch, where the best part of the hold is the rounded edge of the volume that you use for a thumb. Later it also becomes a very active heel. Now let's see it all together. Yeah, so not a flash. Honestly, I think it was easily flashable, but kind of forgetting the sequence and poor footwork resulted in me getting tossed off the wall. So let's try that again. Success. I would say it climbed as intended, and I am not going to tweak it at all. This will probably become part of the circuit, and I will use other holds in the vicinity if I want a modified, harder version of it. This pink problem uses a mix of varied edges, some of which were actually shaped by Keegan, aka Dojo Setting, on YouTube. On his channel, he breaks down a lot of route setting basics, so I am using this as an excuse to point people to his channel because I am sure many of you will find it useful. This problem has some familiar moves past the volume, a movement I hadn't realized I set multiple times until climbing the problems, unfortunately. And you'll see what I mean as you watch the other problems. The holds in the beginning are not overly positive, and while they are difficult, I would say that the real crux is throwing for the minimal pinch and controlling it, as you'll see. I would like to say this problem worked out as intended and felt about as hard as I wanted it to. It took some decent effort, and the final moves were still a bit tricky, inclusive of this frog position at the end, because the feet and the right hand are all angled slightly the opposite direction to how you might want them. This problem is pretty straightforward. The intention was to put one mega jug on the wall for Laura to practice dynos on. I placed it in a spot where the other holds and the jug itself wouldn't get in the way, as well as there are several different options for hands and feet so she can make the move harder or easier as she sees it. It's also close to the mat, so it's less intimidating. To be transparent, I hadn't put much thought into the top, but this hand heel match was actually kind of awkward for flexibility challenged people like myself. For those who watched the last video, which I hope you did, you probably saw a lot of this problem. As I tinkered with it quite a bit, spoiler alert, this one was set to be one of the harder problems. And it's why I played around with the holds so much. So do you think it ended up as I had intended? Well, let's just see. Safe to say that it proved to be challenging. I can kind of break it down into 3 sections. This move, admittedly, is a bit morpho. And if the feet were any worse, I probably wouldn't be able to control the minimal round hold. Which makes the next move hard as well, because you have to shift your hips inwards momentarily so that your left hand doesn't pop from it. Then you have to reach around the volume, which is kind of awkward because you just moved your weight under the volume. If you catch the next hold correctly, you can stabilize everything and sink a bit of weight back into your feet. The next move forces a cross through off of that slopey side pull crimp, which once your hips shift right becomes pretty bad, and if not controlled properly, forces you to fall into the next in-cut crimp, which is good, but with high feet and momentum on the one arm, is extremely hard, if not impossible, for me at my current ability. Section 2 is this move out to the slopey crimp rail. This is just a power/finger strength test. Once I started hitting it, I was able to make it most tries. However, with the adjustments that I made, namely with moving the start hold lower so I couldn't use it as a foot, meant that the bump was fairly tricky. It's hard to see, but I had to again move my hips towards the wall to get fully under the hold, otherwise I would be ripped right off it. That tees us up for the last part of the problem, where you have to reach out to the final slopey crimp. Although it doesn't look like it, this move feels like a dyno, or at least a dead point, even though it just looks like I simply reach out. Keeping your feet here is not an option. Again, if your weight moves away from the wall, you are spit off both holds. When I was forerunning this in my last video, it kind of looks like I just let go of the holds when making attempts. But the reality is that I was just controlling my fall, as I could feel my hands slipping. So while this move probably looks small, it feels big. And as soon as you make contact with the left hand, your momentum carries you left and you try to just smear your foot wherever you can without dabbing. Then you adjust it onto the hold and back flag and match with pretty high feet, or at least high feet for me. That foot position pushes you away from the last hold, which is really good, but with the poor handhold you're on, it makes the last move feel like you're going to fall backwards. Safe to say, it took a lot of attempts and effort, including all the runs while setting it. Here's another one that got a lot of screen time in the last video. You start crossed-armed, then out to a bit of a double Gaston on this rail. Depending on the wall angle and the hold angle, this rail could be considered pretty positive or a bit slopey. On this wall, and at this angle, I would argue that it felt somewhere in the middle, but more towards the latter slopey side of things. You move up the rail and bump to a not so positive crimp, and then left hand to a round pinch. From there, you shift your weight and reach to an undercling and stab your right foot to the rail, moving up and then right to another vertical pinch, where you switch your feet on the rail, pushing and leaning back pretty hard to control it. I thought this problem could be tricky, but it proved to be harder than I thought. I think I underestimated the rail and how weak I am at these side pull / layback positions. Both sessions on this problem I did a bit later on as well, so that might have been a factor because surprisingly, the last move was hard if you weren't fully recovered. After more attempts than expected, I finally sent it.
Oh yeah.
I died.
I'm waiting.
For what?
Thumbs up.
This problem was one that I set in fast forward, so I don't think most caught it. It's pretty straightforward and follows along these same style crimpy black edge holds from earlier. Moving left to right, I actually can't find the footage of this problem actually being sent, so here is the first go at it, where I wasn't sure which feet were in, so I did not match on the last hold, but it should give you an idea of the movement and the difficulty. One more time-lapse problem. This is just kind of a fun problem that moves left and up, and just uses the volume in a different way than the other problems. I wanted to use these slopers on the wall, but with it being overhanging, a lot of these holds feel almost useless. So I set a move at the beginning where you kind of just use it to get in a better body position, and set up for a good hold where you can sink all of your weight into. The next few moves are kind of just big and fun, even though the feet are pretty good. If you don't engage the core and keep your hips in, your body wants to turn out.
Why?
Personally, I found this problem pretty damn fun.
Good job.
This is probably the crimpiest problem that was set. The holds are pretty minimal, anywhere between half a pad to a full pad in depth, especially depending on where you hit the holds. They are also pretty rounded, so there aren't any in-cut edges, and you never feel like you can truly trust them. So on this overhanging wall, I knew this problem would be challenging. And I didn't work this one much while setting, so while I knew I should be able to do all the moves, I didn't know how easily I could string them together. This problem probably felt the most like some things I've climbed outside. It was really a problem that was finger strength intensive and required careful movement with good hip positions.
Oh, that was good. That was so good. You're so strong.
I don't think I'm allowed to use that low foothold. I think I cheated.
You made your own rules.
I infilled the wall after. I have some of the same colors now. And I don't know what I'm supposed to use. My brain, that's what I'm supposed to use.
You don't have one.
I don't have a brain. This was definitely one of the harder problems. I think this was also a bit of a mental problem, which might be why it felt more like an outdoor boulder. Knowing that you could pop off and kind of just fly out was hard to ignore.
Oh yeah. Oh no.
Even the last move, which is a side pulled jug, got a little in your head since you only have one foot and have to smear with the other and push really hard to make the side pull good. Although I realized if I pinched it with my palm and wrapped my thumb, I didn't have to side pull so hard.
Nice, come on.
I actually thought the whole thing would be quite a bit harder, and I was surprised when I actually sent it, but isn't that how it always goes? Yeah. And that brings us to the final problem that was set. It kind of just moves straight up and left, but with some tricky moves. Right off the bat, the move out of the start is a dyno with some tricky coordination. You have to throw up to an okay hold, but if you swing out, you would have to be super strong, aka not me, to hold on to it. So there is an undercling to keep you in, but it is a smaller hold that requires some precision, and no real feet until you establish it. Then you throw for a decent edge, then a sloper that you wrap and pinch, and then toss to a decently in-cut crimp to finish. This problem was a surprise. I would love to blame it on being tired, but it just felt really hard. Part of that might be my lack of coordination and my long limbs, but this first move felt so hard. I can tell it's possible, but it feels like a long ways away. It was a combination of switching my hands fast to the undercling, engaging my core and essentially doing like an L-sit or a leg raise to avoid dabbing, and also preparing to smear the wall that made this move so hard.
Oh, that was close. Oh no. Are you gonna be okay? Are you gonna survive?
After failing who knows how many times, yet still feeling slight improvements, I finally decided to work the rest just to show how it moves.
Yay!
Needless to say, it wasn't over and I was definitely tired, so this guy remains a project and maybe I will post a video of it on our Instagram when I finally complete it, or at least hopefully complete it. Alright, so there you have it, all 10 problems that we set. We didn't initially intend on setting such a perfect number like 10, it just kind of worked out that way, and I only noticed while editing together this video, but it definitely works out because if we're trying to rank the problems from hardest to easiest, what better number to work with than 10? And with that said, I should probably ask those of you who participated and were trying to guess how hard or how easy the problems were, how'd you do? if you feel inclined to do so, leave us a comment and let us know. And maybe you want the insights from me in terms of how I felt they climbed if the footage wasn't super obvious. And I guess I'll do the same thing. I'll just rank them from hardest to easiest, starting with none other than number 10. It probably wasn't a surprise for you guys because you saw the footage, but it was for me because when I started setting it, it wasn't supposed to be that hard. The moves in isolation felt hard, but like reasonable. But when I tried to string it all together, it was definitely really hard, and it works out because now I have a project to keep working on the wall. The next hardest problem probably isn't a surprise for you guys, and it wasn't for me because that's problem number 5. I tweaked it a lot in the last video and I showed a lot of it in this one, so you probably know that it was the second hardest. And the rest of the numbers I'll just kind of rifle off quickly to get through them. So the next hardest was number 9, followed by number 6, then number 8, then number 3, then 7, then 2, then 4, and finally, the easiest problem, which shouldn't be a surprise for you, was number 1. And if it was a surprise for you, maybe you should work on your route reading skills just a little bit. No judgment here, but number 1 was definitely the easiest. And with that said, I should probably backpedal a bit because there weren't 10 problems. There was actually 11 because in the last video I set a blue problem for Laura, which wasn't for me, so I climbed it in that video, and I didn't want to be redundant, so I left it out of this one. So if you want to see that, go check out the last video, and hopefully I'll get some footage of Laura sending it on our Instagram, and I'll also probably post the video of me hopefully sending project number 10 on our Instagram as well. So follow us there if you feel inclined to do so. And that's probably a perfect segue for me to just sign off here. So give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. And if you want to see more content from us, please subscribe. We'd appreciate it. And feel free to leave a comment about our wall, or if you have any questions about the wall or comments about our setting, feel free to do so. We'd appreciate that as well. So I guess that actually is everything now. With that said, take it easy and peace out. We'll see you in the next one.